Fireside Chat to introduce. This conversation will explain an array of life-changing options that emerge when safety becomes paramount. To get a representative and comprehensive understanding, we invite our speakers, Ryan Buck and Eric Saylor, to come up to the stage and give us a good conversation. Please give them a round of applause. And I have a very special announcement. I had a little bird tell me that somebody is celebrating what I call their solar anniversary today. So I have a feeling it's one of my friends on stage right here. And in the spirit of Freedom School, if you who not yet know, we sing Stevie Wonder style. So those that know, know. Those that don't, just clap with us and we'll chime in. So on the count of 3, 2, 1. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday.
I gotta stand for this?
Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday. All right.
Who is the little birdie? You'll never tell?
Twitter? Tweet, 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 tweet. Feliz cumpleaños. Take it away, fellas.
There's a great Office episode where Michael is like yelling at Toby and he just goes, I will kill you. I think I'm going to kill this guy a little bit later.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to do a quick introduction, so Ryan and I own a franchise in Cleveland, Ohio, as well as part of Pennsylvania near the Erie area, and then also the southern tier of New York. It's called CarePatrol. There are about 180 of those franchises throughout the U.S. It was started 30 years ago this year by a social worker, actually, with the idea of helping families understand the options for their aging loved ones and what to do when they needed home care brought in or they needed to explore what type of senior living communities were in their area that were appropriate for their loved one. And actually that's the concept of how this all got started, was that the owner got a call one day as a social worker from a woman who said, I don't think I'm in the right community. And to make a long story short, basically what he found out was she was living in a memory care supported community, and while she did have a dementia diagnosis, was very high functioning and was not appropriate for her, and he helped find adequate and appropriate living for her, and that was how the company was born. So just a brief background, I'll let Ryan tell his. It's interesting, I never thought I would be in this space. In going to business school, I studied marketing and communications. I went into the banking world, was in the banking world for 10 years, and then got an opportunity to work for, at that time, the franchise owner in Northeast Ohio, and made the leap. And I told my wife after the first month of doing it that I'm so happy I did this. I have found my calling. So we are really passionate about what we do, and we have been able to impact so many lives, and it's been a real blessing to be able to be a part of a business that does this.
Yeah, and my story is somewhat similar. Before I get to it, though, I did want to mention I have really, really enjoyed the last 3 days, and it seems like everybody has really enjoyed the presentations and what people have been talking about. And I was thinking yesterday, when I come to these things, normally I get a lot of business help, and that's important. And I would say I've actually gotten more personal help than I've gotten even professional help. Conrad talking about stress, and I've had something in my life over the last month or so that has caused me a great deal of stress. And probably on the outside, you wouldn't know that, but on the inside, your body's churning all the time. And there's just so many things that I've heard, right? Like, Tina, a bird shitting on your face. Like, your life doesn't get much worse than that. And then you just power through, man. Grit, right? And perseverance. And everybody is in here, and you have a purpose, and you're driven to make money, but people and helping others and being involved in other people's lives. We have helped 10,000 people finding a facility. And it has been immensely enjoyable. I get to hang out with my best friend every day, and it's really been a blast. So I wanted to say that even before I got into my background. My background was in commercial banking, and I hated every minute of it. I love my clients, I love my coworkers, but hey, working for a bank, man, that's rough. You know, you got a client, and the client wants X size loan, and you have to go through 10 layers, and they still tell you no. But at CarePatrol, we help one family at a time, and you really get to change their lives in a moment in time where they are dealing with something that you don't know what to do. What do I do when my mom isn't safe at home alone anymore? And we went through this with a lot of our family as well. So I got a phone call one day from the previous owner, and he says, hey, I'm expanding my business, and I think you should come on board. I was living in Chicago, and I remember saying, do I have to move to Cleveland? Because I don't know that I want to do that. And 6 months later, I'm loading up a van, and I'm moving all of my belongings to Cleveland from Chicago. And I had the same experience as Eric. After about a month, I was like, I love working with old people. And I would have never said that before. And they need a voice when they can't speak for themselves, right? And so, thank you. And you know, sometimes I heard somebody talking about Goggins, right? And Mike Rowe says, don't always follow passion, follow opportunity, and passion will follow. And I think that's what happened probably for both of us, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, you guys, made a mistake by giving us both a microphone, especially this guy. But to get into this topic a little bit, we get this question all the time, right? So just to paint that picture, what that often looks like is we get a call from a distraught adult child, and they're saying, my mom is in the hospital right now. She had a fall. She broke her hip. She's going to get some limited therapy for a couple weeks, but it's clear, as we've talked about it as a family, she cannot be home anymore. What do we do, right? And that's where we're able to step in and literally take that family by the hand and walk them through the entire process of resources and communities that are appropriate and finances and connecting them with the right resources like elder law attorneys and VA and all those different sort of things. But to kind of get to this root question that we have the Fireside Chat on, what do we do? The first thing I would say is I would encourage every family, and I know Ryan does as well, is to have a conversation with that aging loved one. We've heard this in the education side this morning and yesterday, that there are differences from what took place 10 and 20 years ago to what's taking place today, right? And culturally speaking, your parents did things differently than you're going to do them, and your kids are going to do them. And a lot of times what we see that is that generation held their cards very close to their chest, right? They didn't talk about ever end-of-life type things. They didn't talk about finances. They didn't talk about what if I can't care for my husband or my wife, my spouse anymore. And so that's something as the adult children that we have to facilitate that conversation. We have to bring it up. They're not going to bring it up on their own, and it's not going to go away, right? So I would say, first of all, be open and honest with your aging loved one, if that's your parent, your uncle, your grandma, whatever that role is, and ask them some questions. Some of those questions could be, what concerns do you have about leaving your home if you weren't unable to stay in it anymore? And listen then at that point and hear them out. If you get hospitalized and the doctors and the professionals are saying you can't come back home because of X, Y, Z, what kind of plans have you put in place for that? And open up that dialogue. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so we do a lot of work at hospitals. We're very, very blessed in Cleveland to have the Cleveland Clinic, and we have some really wonderful hospital organizations that we work with. And along with what Eric has said, having that conversation, I already put my advanced directives together, and I am 100 years old today, and
42.
I knew it was coming out at some point. And I've already done mine because I don't want something to happen on the plane ride home and my wife and kids have no idea what my advance directives are. So even if you're in the audience today and you haven't put them together, do it. You know, you can find it online even. I would get an elder law attorney personally, but you can certainly do that. The other side to the conversation is, again, most of the families or many of the families we help are in an emergency situation, right? Somebody's at the hospital and they can't go home and, oh my goodness, I have 24 to 48 hours to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, and I have been told by the doctor my mom can't go home. It's a really, really, really scary time. And one of the things I would say is advocate for your loved one, because the hospital might say you have 24 hours, but you need to say, I don't have a plan yet. And you can't just kick my mom out simply because I don't have a plan and I'm being told this for the first time. So be an advocate, as we all are in here, right? The other side that's gotten even scarier, so I've been doing this for 7, Eric for 5. When I started doing this 7 years ago, our average client that we worked with was, I love the name Myrtle. My buddy Anthony, who works with us, his first client was Myrtle, and always stuck in my head, so I always use the name Myrtle. Myrtle was 92 years old, and she needed a little bit of help with, dressing and bathing and med management. And now we're working with Steve, who's 58, who needs assisted living memory care. So people are sicker than they've ever been, and it's really odd, right? Because it's the easiest time in our world to live, right? We all have a phone, we all have an iPad, it's easy to live day to day, but we're sicker and we have almost less information because of all the information, right? And it's gotten to be, frankly, really sad. Placing somebody who's 92 is a lot different than placing someone who's 58. And take care of yourselves, right? I know that it institutes a lot of different aspects, but it's gotten really, really difficult. And the problem's not going away.
Yeah, so another area that I want to discuss while we're up here, because I think it ties into really this whole conference, is we have been hearing a lot about, awareness and then action steps, right? So I'm aware there's an issue going on in education, but what are the action steps, right? I'm aware there's an issue in my business, but what are the action steps? One of the hardest things that we have to see when we do this is what is called caregiver stress or caregiver burnout. And that is where an adult child, is caring for someone and they are so passionately obsessed with that individual's needs that they're wilting away themselves, right? They're not sleeping, they're not eating, they have anxiety all the time, they have depression, they don't have the time for social interaction anymore. Actually, correction. Politely, they don't make the time for social interaction anymore, and so their social life is falling apart. And it's all under this heavy pressure to, anvil over their head that I have to take care of this loved one. And oftentimes we have to say to a family member, I understand that you never wanted to have to consider the day that you would put your loved one in a community. But if you keep going down this route that you're on today, you're going to pass away before they will, and then who will they have, right? So when we look at these situations, we're looking at it from a broad perspective of, yes, there is this aging person that needs care, and here's what they need, but there's this person behind the curtain, behind the scenes, who is doing all this heavy lifting, and they're getting worn out, and they're getting burnout. So, speaking of awareness, we have to remind people of that and say, listen, so how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Somebody who has a loved one who has dementia and they get up 10 to 15 times during the night, and 5 of those times they come into the bedroom where their child is sleeping and say, where am I? And that person's sleep is interrupted and their work is interrupted, right? Those people often are obviously working, raising children, so they're in that sandwich generation. So awareness around this is really important as well, that we want to make sure that we work with a family and help them understand, yes, we're doing this for your mother or your father or so on, but we're also doing this to help you as well.
I think the last stat I saw was 63% of caregivers have a major medical issue or hospitalization before the person they're caring for. 60, think of that number, 63%, well over half. So if you're caring for somebody, that's, just keep that in the back of your mind, right? You have to we talked about self-care, you really do have to take care of yourself because that person is depending on you. And, the question really is then, what do you do when they're not safe at home anymore, right? Can you bring in 24-hour care into your home? Just to give you some nice figures to think about right now, because this is always the fun part of it. When you're talking with a family, you tell them what the cost of all of this is, right? I run with these numbers every day. I'm a numbers guy, and I don't think about them anymore. I don't know if you do either, but like when you tell a family what the cost is, 24-hour care in your home, now I can only speak about Cleveland, Ohio, is about $18,000 a month. If you are in a facility, a nursing home facility, it's 12 to 15, and if you're in assisted living, it's 5 to 7. So depending on where you're at in this country or other countries, that number could change, high or low. And when you talk to families about these numbers, I think we have to also be cognizant that they just roll off the tongue now because I'm so used to saying them, but that's a shocking number, right? Cleveland, Ohio. Think about that, $18,000 a month in Cleveland, Ohio. What's that like in LA? What is it, Mark?
I was telling him, I think it's like 350 in LA. I'll look up right now. But I just remember, because the number that came in my head was like 300K. And then you're like 240, and I'm like, that seems a little light. I'm like, oh, it's Cleveland though. Like, of course it is.
Yeah.
It's way less expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now.
We saw the mad Google fingers going over there.
I mean, if anybody has any questions during this conversation, please just talk or shoot your hand up. We're just two guys talking at this point. This is like all we love to do, so.
Yeah, it's minimum 20 grand a month, and that's like your basic is like 20 grand a month. So that's like 240, just basic, nothing else, not other costs. We're not going to talk about the indirect costs. That's direct costs.
Correct.
Because, hey, I am actually spending this. That's not because I'm taking care of you, I don't have another job. That's not because I'm taking care of you, I'm now not sleeping. Like you said, that when you want to tank someone's performance, keep them from sleeping.
Yeah.
Sure, it's 3 or 4. If you talk about the full cost.
Sure.
The other thing I just want to add to that, which is a hard part of what we have to do, I always kind of say when I have these meetings with families, is I said, please don't shoot the messenger, right? But there's a huge misconception in our healthcare world amongst the patients that, I'll just have Medicare pay for this. The problem is Medicare does not pay for any of this. Yes, you can get your hospitalization covered. You can get some home therapy covered. You can get some skilled time in an acute rehab facility covered. That in itself is very limited. I mean, 100 days in the United States is the maximum. The national average that somebody gets is 20 days. Okay? So we have to also help families understand that too, because they're operating under this preconceived notion that if mom or dad ever ends up needing to go to a care community, we'll just have Medicare pick that up. And oftentimes the senior is thinking the same thing. And then of course we have to unfortunately, say, well, that's not the case. This is something that has to be paid for by financial planning. So through purchasing long-term care insurance policies, using your assets that you've saved up. And one of the hardest things that we actually have to battle, which is I never knew going into this, was the senior not willing to go somewhere because they wanted to leave a legacy for their children. And now they're realizing that, well, if I go into this facility at $7,000 a month, I can't leave my son and my daughter an inheritance like I plan to, right? And that's shocking for them. And now that poor child is in a situation where they're saying to mom and dad, I don't care about the money. I care about you. You need to do this, right? But that's another hurdle then they have to come over. So, educating people, that's one of our priorities. That's why we like to come to conferences like this. That's why we like to do TED Talks, so to speak, because we're trying to get the message out there that this is something that you should start preparing for in your 40s and 50s, right? Versus, oh crap, mom's in the hospital now what?
You've probably heard this stat, but 10,000 people a day are turning 65. 10,000.
There was a couple questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to start and then I'll just pass. I see there's a couple people with their hands up. I do want to bring something to your attention. Maybe you guys can talk about it. But like yesterday, I talked about the deaf and hard of hearing population. When I look at that for my parents, when my mom, I took care of her, but my father is not someone that I can take care of. And so when I looked for care for him, I found the New England Home for the Deaf because every single person that walks in his room can sign to him. So I don't have to worry about his loneliness or his inability to be taken care of properly. So I'd like to hear a little bit if you guys have these kinds of things, or if you don't, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Like, what kinds of things are you doing at CarePatrol to think about those situations? Because we also have an aging population that also has other disabilities. They don't all look the same. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, right? But we have young people going into assisted living and long-term care and needing help. When you have a 58-year-old going into a community where the average population is 87, that's a big difference, right? And so I don't know. I mean, we at CarePatrol are looking to do a lot of educational resources and making sure people feel comfortable. But the reality is there is a huge gap in the coming silver tsunami when it comes to those that are going to need care and their predecessors. They're going to go in 10 to 15 years earlier. So I don't know that I have an answer for you, unfortunately, because this is evolving faster than I ever expected. And again, we're helping people that are sicker and younger. This is going to be a discussion we're going to have, in my opinion, for the next 50 years.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer than what Ryan said, but the reality is that's the case. And I think it's going to take pioneers. I know that maybe sounds too simple, but you know, the other thing that we see often in Cleveland's a bit of a melting pot, as a lot of major metropolitans are. We have a large Eastern European population, we have a large Hispanic population, and we'll often get asked, you know, are there any care homes that speak their language, right? And you know, it's like there's two, which that kind of really stinks as a family when you're thinking, I only have these two options, and they may not even be geographically appropriate for what that family is looking for. It might be 45 minutes away from where they live. So there is definitely a gap right now in the care industry for meeting those other pocketed needs that are out there. I'm hoping that as awareness gets built that, you know, more of those kind of communities will come about, but it's a great question.
I just want to add to that. I think that there still is a federal mandate to make sure that they have access to that, especially if you have a disability. So they need to have that communication. You can't receive good care unless I can communicate with you. Yep. And so I do think that, yes, people should pioneer it, but we need people like you guys voicing that too. Because if we don't, we can't make the change. I'm not in your shoes every day. Yeah. So.
Go ahead.
Hey, I just want to give some context. I feel it's going to add to my question. I'm 37 years old, divorced. My children are from my first marriage. I have a son who's 14 who has severe autism. Without the labels, he needs a lot of care. Even eating and things like that are very difficult. My career was pushed to the side to be a full-time parent to him and his brothers. And during that process, my mother, who's 58 years old, was diagnosed a few years ago with Lewy body dementia.
So sorry to hear that.
Her mother passed away 2 years ago from dementia, as well as her father. So I'm the sandwich generation you're talking about. I understand the burnout. During COVID, I went back to work. I work anywhere from 36 to 80 hours a week, night shift, as a caregiver for people with dementia, as well as day shift being a mom of a son with autism. So with the burnout, I understand, but the resources for the people with burnout just isn't there. We talk about it, but it's not there. My son gets services from the Department of Disability and Special Needs, but there's no caregivers. There's a shortage of people who want to work in that field, which is why I went back to work, because I wanted to help the shortage. But, you know, while they'll pay for people to come into my home and help bathe him and do those things so I can get a break or take a nap, running 3 days with no sleep. I can't find anyone to fill the spot. And people are so intimidated by the needs of people with dementia and autism, because they can be severe, that trying to train someone to get them to even do the work is impossible. So we need to talk about the shortage of people and the awareness and the knowledge of people going into these fields and educating the community on how to help people like me who do get burnout.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say God bless you for what you're doing. That's
Yep.
amazing. Can we just give her a round of applause? The best answer I can give is I agree 100%. This is something that not on the level that you're battling right now personally, but that we battle as a company, in that we have communities, facilities in the area just around us, for example, that we used to be able to rely on to provide quality care for individuals, and we've had to start telling families, I would not take my loved one there. They're having staffing problems. They're having high turnover. There's complaints coming in on a regular basis. I personally believe this goes to a national level, because it's no secret that the caregiver shortage is nationwide, for sure. I think it's going to actually take raising awareness in legislation to change things. There's a whole conversation I could have with you guys, off to the side about this Pandora's box that's been opened right now, where you have agency nursing companies that were brought in during the heaviest shortage of all, post-COVID, right after when nursing homes started opening up and taking more admissions and things. And, what basically happened was there was a mass exodus from the full-time employees, because they quickly learned what the agency nurses were making and said, well, why am I being an employee here at this rate? I'll go work for the agency and make this instead. But now you've lost a huge continuity of care, right? Instead of mom having those 4 or 5 caregivers a week that she gets to know, and more importantly, they get to know her and what her needs are and her quirks and personality and stuff, you have agency nurses, maybe 20, 30 coming in, right, at a different time. And again, that's no fault of those, right? We probably would have done the same thing if I'm making $18 an hour and I can go make 28, we're all probably going to say, I'll go make 28, right? But now we have this problem of, okay, well, how do we reel this back in now? Because we have this caregiver shortage, right? But we also have a pay disparity now between these groups. So how do we fix that? It's going to take legislation. It's going to take awareness. It's going to take everybody working together on that. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to add to that, but your point hits very close to home.
Yeah, there was 2 pandemics. There was COVID-19, and then there's a caregiver shortage. And COVID-19 is over, and the caregiver shortage is not. Laura, did you have a question as well? We're running a little short on time.
Yeah,
So
I'm just piggybacking off of what she said. Do you provide any family services separate for the patient that you're putting or trying to help get into the care? Like she's mentioning, and it came right to my head when she was talking about it as well. But what are you doing to kind of guide them so they don't fall apart? Because those finances are pretty grueling. And if you know anything about elder law, and if you go to an elder law well before your family gets ill, there's like a 7-year look back or something.
5.
Is that what it is? Is it 5?
In Kentucky, I think it's 7. Okay.
You can preserve those finances and they won't be touched. And especially if you have 2 parents and one has to go, like what happens then? Like, so there's a lot of stress. So I guess my question is this: do you have family services for the people that are coming to you saying, I need help with my parent or whomever?
Yeah, in fact, 70% of the cases we work are pro bono, and the other 30% are still pro bono. Because we're not just helping a senior find an assisted living community or a nursing home, but we've become counselors, we've become nurses and caregivers and doctors and lawyers, and not really any of those things, but you become all of those when you start working with a family. And it's amazing what people are willing to tell you when their loved one needs a lot of help. It's just, hi, my name is Ryan with CarePatrol, and it's 30 minutes of just a bunch of information that's been given to you. So we work with families with their specific needs, right? Sometimes you have to help them find a moving company. We do that, right? It's really from A to Z, and then it's afterwards too. We're always there for families, and anybody doing this should be there after you're helping them anyway.
Yeah, we have a resource packet that we give to every family that has things to, hey, these are some recommended in the area elder law attorneys, right? These are some support groups, maybe for dementia might be an Alzheimer's Association support group, something like that, or a church support group that's in their area. We certainly, can always add to that list, but we try to give them a fundamental starting point.
Can I know we're out of time. Can I just read one thing? Okay, so I've been thinking about this over the last year, why you do what you do, why I do what I do. And I want to read everybody a text I got from my mom yesterday. And this is, it might be hard to get through this, so I apologize. And I'm sorry I'm taking up more time. But this is why I do what I do, because I hope somebody, if my mom was in the same situation as my clients, would help her. This is the verse for your birthday tomorrow. I was looking ahead. Happy early birthday. You are a blessing to us and your family. You are such a hard worker, great son and father. I think she's probably talking about my brother. Great husband and brother. Hope your conference bring you great contacts for your business. God bless you this coming year. The day you were born for me, the sun stood still. And if my mom needed help, I hope somebody would be there for her. And that's why we do what we do, because that's somebody else's mom out there. And they said the same thing to their son at some point. And that's why we need to be there for our seniors, because a lot of times they don't have that voice. And so that's what we do.